All right, today we're tackling the big one, the Second World War. It was, without a doubt, the largest and most destructive war in all of human history. It's an incredible story of empires, ideologies, and destruction that literally changed everything about the world we live in. So let's just dive right in.
It's a pretty simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it's actually almost impossible to really wrap your head around. The scale of this thing was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, or has seen since.
Just take a look at that number. 43 million. Let that sink in for a second. And here's the crazy part. That's just the estimated number of people who died in Europe. That doesn't even count the millions and millions more who died across Asia and the Pacific. The human cost is just, well, it's beyond staggering.
And this conflict was truly global. We're talking every single continent. Yep, there was even military activity in Antarctica. The fighting happened in the fields of France, the deserts of Africa, the jungles of Asia, everywhere. And the technology of war took a massive, terrifying leap forward, from massive air battles to, of course, the creation of a terrifying new weapon.
So how on earth did it all get started? Well, the first part of the war was really defined by the absolutely shocking speed and success of three nations we call the Axis powers: Germany, Italy, and Japan.
I mean, just look how fast everything happened. The Germans perfected this strategy they called Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. In 1939, boom, they invade Poland. By 1940, they've completely stormed across Western Europe. France fell in just a matter of weeks. It was unbelievable. Then in 1941, Hitler makes his biggest move yet, turning on his ally and invading the Soviet Union. And while all of this is going on, Japan is expanding its own empire across Asia, leading to, well, a day that would change everything.
That day, of course, was December 7th, 1941, when Japan launched its surprise attack on the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt's famous words really captured the shock and the anger of the country. And with that single act, the United States was officially in the war, and what had been two separate conflicts became one truly global struggle.
Okay, so by the beginning of 1942, the Axis powers looked pretty much unstoppable. But 1942, this was the year it all changed. All across the world, in three huge, decisive battles, the entire momentum of the war started to swing back towards the Allies.
The first of these massive turning points happened out on the open ocean, in the Pacific, near a tiny little island called Midway.
Now, the key to this American victory wasn't just about having more ships or planes. It was about intelligence. U.S. codebreakers had actually figured out the Japanese naval codes, so they knew an attack was coming and could set a trap. In what was a stunning reversal, American dive bombers found and sank 4 of Japan's most powerful aircraft carriers. It was an absolutely catastrophic defeat, and honestly, the Japanese Navy never fully recovered from it.
At the same time, half a world away, an even bigger and bloodier battle was taking place. German armies had pushed deep, deep into the Soviet Union, all the way to a city that had been named after the Soviet leader himself, Stalingrad.
The fighting in Stalingrad was some of the most savage in human history. It was brutal, house-to-house combat that just completely stopped the German advance. Then, the Soviets launched a gigantic counterattack, completely surrounding the entire German army. Trapped in the Russian winter, with no food or supplies, they were eventually forced to surrender. This wasn't just a battle, it was the beginning of the end for Germany on the Eastern Front.
And the third major turning point happened in a totally different environment: the deserts of North Africa, at a little railway stop in Egypt called El Alamein.
This is where British forces finally put a stop to the Axis advance toward the incredibly important Suez Canal. This victory, plus new American and British troops landing to the west, caught the Axis army in a giant pincer move. By 1943, every Axis soldier in North Africa had surrendered. This was huge. It secured the Middle East's oil fields and opened up a whole new front to attack Europe from the south.
So with the tide finally turned, the Allies began the long, hard road to victory. And this final phase of the war was all about applying constant, coordinated pressure from all sides to finally crush the Axis powers for good.
You can really see the strategy here for Germany. From the west, on D-Day, you have the largest amphibious invasion in history hitting the beaches of Normandy. At the same time, from the east, you have millions of Soviet soldiers just pushing and pushing, driving the Germans all the way back. Caught in this giant two-front squeeze, the Nazi regime just crumbled. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was finally over.
But the war wasn't completely finished. Over in the Pacific, Japan was still fighting with this incredible, ferocious determination. As American forces got closer and closer to Japan's home islands, the fighting just got more and more horrific. Places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa were absolute bloodbaths. This left Allied leaders with a truly terrifying question.
The answer came from a top-secret program known as the Manhattan Project. For years, the U.S. had been in a race to build a weapon based on atomic power. And in August of 1945, President Truman made the decision to use it. Atomic bombs were dropped on two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just days later, Japan surrendered. The Second World War was over.
But the end of the fighting really wasn't the end of the story. You see, the war didn't just stop. It completely redrew the map of the world and totally reset the global balance of power.
I mean, this chart really shows you just how total the change was. Before 1939, the world was dominated by old European empires like Britain and France. After 1945, those empires were shattered. In their place, you have two new superpowers, the USA and the Soviet Union, both armed with nuclear weapons, facing off in what would become the Cold War. The war also paved the way for the communist takeover in China and the division of Korea, a painful split that still exists today.
So when you think about it, from the United Nations, which was created from the ashes of the war, to the alliances and the tensions that still shape our world, so much of our life was forged in this conflict. And that really is the question for us today, isn't it? How much of our modern world is still living in the shadow of World War II?